Welcome to Appreciating the Entrepreneurial Journey, the podcast for business owners who want to see around corners and thrive financially. Your host is Cannon Carr, CEO and business owner at CornerCap. Tune in every week for lessons learned from the trenches of entrepreneurship, business success, and financial independence.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the program. Cannon Carr here. Alongside me is Claudia Bettinger, our producer. And Claudia, we are excited to bring Stephanie Stuckey to the conversation today. She is revitalizing an iconic brand that she calls an 87-year-old startup.
Today's guest, Stephanie Stuckey, is CEO of Stuckey's Corporation. And after a 10-year career as a lawyer and politician, Stephanie went back to her roots and bought her grandfather's business after years of corporate ownership. She's working to reinvent the business around this iconic brand, and after 3 years is starting to see some really cool success.
It's a great conversation, and Claudia and I will be back at the end of the program to summarize the 3 or 4 takeaways. But as a heads up, as you go through the conversation, listen for a couple interesting things. One, how Stephanie turns negative feedback into a positive situation. 2, how she talks about building those emotional connections across your team and across your customer base who are loyal to the brand in a powerful and deliberate way. And then 3rd, it's just fascinating how she takes scarcity and turns it into innovation in a very clever way. So keep a heads up and eye out for that information in the conversation, and sit back and enjoy the conversation with Stephanie Stuckey. Well, Stephanie, thanks for joining us on the program. And to get started, I thought we would kind of focus on the fact that you didn't have really a traditional path into the business world. You know, I know you spent 15 years at the Georgia State House of Representatives. You know, you're an environmentalist with the city and Southface. Did you always have it in mind to run a business? And tell us a little bit just about that journey into Stuckey's.
I did not have it in my mind to run a business at all. This was a completely unexpected pivot in my life at age 53. When I thought my career was settled in a very strategic direction. And sometimes life just throws things at you and you can decide if you want to catch it or dodge it. And I caught it. I literally got a phone call one day while I was focused on my sustainability career, telling me that Stuckey's was for sale and asking if I was interested in buying it. So I took the call and I said yes, and haven't regretted it since.
Did you have to think about it, or did you just kind of know in your heart this was it? And in answering that question, you know, what prepared you in your prior success to?
Oh, I absolutely had to think about it. This was a complete turnaround of not only my life, but a turnaround of the company, because it was 6 figures in debt at that time, and would cost my life savings to buy it. And I didn't have any business experience. So that definitely made me hit the pause button and think about it. And I spent a couple of months talking to financial advisors and getting their input, and also figuring out how I was going to live.
Right.
I don't think people consider when they start a startup, which is what I consider Stuckey's. We're an 87-year-old startup. That it's not just that upfront money you need to buy the company or get the company started. You really need to give yourself a runway of a year. I thought a year would be enough, and it was 2.5 years before I could start drawing a salary. And even then, I draw a very modest salary. The entire management team makes more than my partner and I do.
All right.
And that's deliberate. We could pull more money from the company if we wanted to, but we're dedicated to growing this company and reinvesting our earnings. So we're focused on growth. But the point being, it's a huge financial commitment to start a company or revive a company. So definitely gave it some thought. How my life prepared me for this, I think it's important, no matter what career decisions you make, to realize that there are skill sets that are transferable. And just because you don't have that specific knowledge base, I've always considered it more important to have key skill sets, such as the ability to present well, which is something I knew as a litigator, I was a trial attorney as a state representative and head of sustainability for City of Atlanta. Had to advocate for tough causes, which is definitely something I do every day at Stuckey's. How to message, how to communicate well. And then the most important is how you build a team, because you can't run a company on your own of this size and of the size that we aspire to. And I think a lot of times we see these very charismatic CEOs in the media and think that they run these companies single-handedly, and they don't.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Absolutely.
the characteristic that's most shared by CEOs that I most admire and I think are the most successful is their capacity to build a team.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I've done throughout my career.
I know that when you were considering buying the business with your life savings, did that dampen your resolve, or did that actually kind of get you to work through it? And in that process, how did you get comfortable making the decision?
Well, I think you hit upon it. You say get you to work through it. So when people give you, I don't even think of it as negative feedback, but feedback that may not be what you're hoping for, perhaps. And I think it's really important when you're getting feedback to really approach it with an open mindset, because a lot of times what you had in mind is not the right solution. And clearly what Stuckey's had been doing was not working, or the company wouldn't have been in a nosedive. So the feedback I got from those initial financial advisors was spot on. They said, this is a risky financial decision. And they were right. And had I continued with the trajectory of the company as it was, focused on the roadside retail stores, the company, I would not be talking to you today. I would be practicing law somewhere. I would have had to gone back to practicing law for a living, which is actually a pretty good fallback to have.
Yeah, not a bad fallback if you have to do it.
But listening to that feedback made me realize, and it took a full year for me. And then I brought on a business partner, and I brought on a business partner who had the skill set I really needed. And then the two of us came up with a strategy together, but we'd started brainstorming about how we could revive this company. And we realized that the roadside retail empire that Stuckey's had been was in 1972. That was our peak. That's when we had more stores than any other period. That was decades ago.
Right. It's today, an aging brand in that regard.
Run a roadside retail chain like a TA or a Pilot or a Buc-ee's, which people always say, oh, what about Buc-ee's? To be like that would cost us an investment of a couple of million per store. Just the upfront cost. And then you have to run the store. And then you have to get the product for the store. And then you have to have all this expertise and infrastructure. Those businesses you don't snap your fingers and have that business. They all started as a store and then two stores, which is how my grandfather started, right?
Yeah. He
built it up. It was very slow growth. We didn't have the capacity to do that. And not only that, but there's so much competition in that space now. When my grandfather started Stuckey's, there was no TA, there was no Love's, there was no Pilot, there was no Buc-ee's. Stuckey's was the first roadside retail chain. We had a completely open canvas.
Right. But the landscape had shifted, right? So when you were presented with this opportunity, and what a great point you've made, right? You got negative feedback, but it didn't dampen your resolve. I guess in a sense, just confirmed maybe some of your suspicions, made you smarter, made you plan for the downside risk, but clearly, saw opportunity. So when you did,
I realized I had to pivot. Their advice was sound. This business model won't work, but then what about this other business model, right? So that's what made me figure it out.
So did you have that plan ready to go on day one when you suddenly had bought the assets, or did you go in knowing, hey, I broadly know where I got to go, but I'm not sure what the plan is yet?
It was the latter. And I would love to say I had an idea of how I could turn it around when I invested my life savings. I didn't, but I knew it was a brand that had sticking power. And that is something that was not on the financial statements. You don't see on a balance sheet the goodwill or the decades of families who stopped at Stuckey's and had these wonderful memories. And my entire lifetime, because I have the last name Stuckey, I had people telling me stories about my brand. So I think that's an important takeaway for people in marketing and branding, that if you have a brand that really connects emotionally with people, it's going to enable you to survive tough times. So the fact that Stuckey's had an incredible downfall because my grandfather sold the company, and we had decades of outside corporate owners who didn't get the brand, who trashed it, honestly. We're still here because of all the goodwill that you don't see on the balance sheet. You don't see that on the income statement, but it was there, and I knew it was there, and it took me a year to figure out how to tap into it, which is we're reinventing the brand as a pecan snack company, snacks and candies, which we've always done. So it's not a full.
That was the roots. That was one of the roots, right?
Yeah, there's something there that was always there, and you're
authentic.
You're reviving it, right?
Yeah.
So we've always made pecan log rolls. We've always made pralines. We've always made pecan snacks, and now we're really ramping that up in a big way. And my grandfather did some co-packing and private labeling for some other businesses, but really his focus was selling his product in his stores. Well, we don't really have that many stores anymore. We still have a handful of them. So that is sort of what I call the legacy business that we still have it. We're not going to totally ditch the legacy business, but it's a very small percentage of our growth. The growth and the increase in sales is coming from selling our pecan snacks and our candies that we now make ourselves because we bought a manufacturing facility to some 5,000 retailers nationwide. And that list is growing.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So just to finish this concept then, so you did allow yourself maybe a year, give or take, right? A certain period where you had, in theory, the capital runway, and we can come back to that in just a moment, but in theory, the capital runway and certainly the power of the brand to leverage, but you needed some time to figure it out. And I guess you gave yourself, a year before really doing any big commitments to figure it out.
I was incredibly impatient, and I still am. I'm learning patience because comebacks don't happen overnight. It's not all like you see in the movies, like Rocky, and there's a knockout punch, and then he's on top.
That's Hollywood for you, right?
That's Hollywood.
Right.
Yeah, the real life, even the business stories that you see in the movies, it's a slog, and it wasn't like I planned out. Oh, okay, I'm going to give myself a year. I'm going to give myself some grace. No, like every single day, I was waking up thinking, how can I make money?
Right. Well, and I know
the crisis mode is how do you make money, right? I mean, I wanted to be about obviously a lot more than we're not just selling pecan log rolls. We're selling the Great American Road Trip. We're selling American manufacturing. We're selling the freedom and independence of exploring America by car. We're selling pecans, like the Georgia grown and American made product. But initially, it's like, how do I get out of this financial ditch that this company is in? How do I make payroll?
And I don't want to dwell on it, but it is just such that fascinating transition period. We knew the business was in a tough spot, right? And you've talked about that in prior conversations with people. But were there surprises where you're like, oh my God, it's a lot worse than I thought?
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time. I mean, I would go look at our warehouse and I'd ask for a inventory breakdown and they wouldn't have it. And there was no computerization or modernization at the warehouse. We now have scanning technology and we have real-time inventory. We just got that in place a few months ago. So 3 years into the journey, we finally modernized the warehouse. That stuff takes time. It takes money. I didn't get access to financial reports until this year.
Wow. Because you just didn't have the financial records in place?
We had a very expensive, archaic clunker of a financial system that to get a new license would have cost a lot of money. So I would just call. We had 9 employees when I started the company. We had one person who's a CPA in-house. And so I would call her and say, generate a report for me. And so she would send it to me. So I would get it, but I couldn't open up my laptop and be able to manipulate financial data, right? And when we bought a manufacturing facility, and then my business partner, he had a company that he ran as a pecan snack company, Front Porch Pecans, and that's now part of our umbrella of brands. So he had his own accounting system. The company we bought had an accounting system. Stuckey's had an accounting system. So it's taken us 3 years to consolidate financials into, we use Business Central, which is a Microsoft tool. And it's just so wonderful. Like I am now just geeking out, and I never thought I would be really enjoying hunkering down on numbers, but I am, because
Well, now you've gotten it kind of up on your skis, right? At least you've got some realistic financial data that tell the stories for you.
And
right?
we're still getting it inputted. We still have, the company we bought had 2 separate accounting systems because they had a business and then they added a business, and they kept the accounting and they kept the business entities separate.
Yeah.
And 2 different accounting systems. So we've still got one more piece to add to the system. We've added, when you look at all of it, 5 different financial systems into one. And it just goes to show like how hard it is sometimes to revive a brand. There's things you asked, the initial question was, were there surprises? Getting a good handle on real-time, accurate financial information.
And we often hear that too. I mean, the due diligence you try to do, it only can get you so far until you get in there and realize you have to create sometimes what doesn't exist.
Which makes it very hard for us to access capital because they want accurate financial data.
Yeah. Were there 1 or 2 discoveries that enabled you to kind of move the needle toward profitability there in that first year?
The first year, it's so basic. And in a way, I think not having a business background was very helpful to me because I just focused on the core essentials. How do you get a business profitable? You spend less and you earn, you make more, you sell more.
Very practical. Yeah.
When times are really tough, you have to figure out how to make do with what you've got. And I think scarcity breeds innovation. So I didn't have a lot. And I remember our warehouse, I'm trying to remember the number, but I'm going to throw out what I think was pretty close. It's about 20, 30,000 in that range of dead inventory that hadn't moved. And we did a whole spreadsheet on, we labeled, green is inventory that's turning, yellow is inventory that's not really turning, it's very slow. And then red was like, this has been sitting on the shelves for 5 years and gathering dust. And we had a lot of yellow and red. And so if you total those 2 up, it'd be like 30 grand. And so I thought, okay, and I didn't want to take a loss because we were already in the negative. And I've learned very quickly, like you cannot make money from these closeout businesses because you lose money selling closeout inventory. And the large companies might be able to afford to do that. And they just want to clear their books and they want to get stuff off their shelves and they don't want to carry that dead inventory on their books, but we couldn't afford to do that. So I got all that dead inventory and put them in what I called mystery boxes and started selling them online. So the dead inventory is kind of a misnomer because it's just stuff that didn't turn. It doesn't mean it's not interesting.
Not saleable in some way, right? Yeah.
And a lot of it was stuff like we'd have a case pack of 24 and it would be breakable items like mugs and 2 would be broken and then we couldn't sell the case. No one wants to buy a 22 pack when it's made to be a 24 pack. So we'd have 24 perfectly good mugs, or we had a case pack of John Wayne bobbleheads that were actually, they were selling them on eBay for $250, but I don't have time to like go post stuff on eBay and create a So I would put the John Wayne bobbleheads in mystery boxes. And I put that online and say, look, I just made 100 mystery boxes. 2 of them have a John Wayne bobblehead in them that's worth $250. You might get the John Wayne bobblehead. Right. You might not. We found Britney Spears t-shirts that were kind of cool, actually. People liked them. We had a case of them. We had fidget spinners. We had High School Musical light up keychains. And I had a lot of, and I was putting online, like, here I am making mystery boxes. We sold that the first year and a half, we sold 1,000 mystery boxes.
I love that creative idea though. I want to find out. Right.
We made a profit.
So now let's look long term then. So what, you're 3 years into it, you have accelerated growth, you've improved the cost structure so far, you've done some basic bootstrapping and blocking and tackling. Where do you ultimately want to take the brand here as you see it now, 10 years from now?
we have crazy growth. I mean, it's insane. It's the pecan snacks that are really selling. And that's what we see as our opportunity. It's just like my grandfather. He looked at the landscape, literally the roadside landscape, and saw it was vacant. And there was a void that he could fill. So I look at my landscape is the snack nut aisle in the convenience stores and the grocery stores and the gift shops of America. And I see a big gaping opportunity for pecan snacks. It's the only snack nut. This is such an amazing fact. It is the only snack nut native to our country. So all these other nuts you see on the shelves, pistachio, cashew, Brazil nut, almonds, they're either not grown in our country, or let's be real, you have to manipulate the environment to be conducive to grow your product. And the almond, and I love almonds, and we actually sell some products with almonds, so I'm not like bashing the other nuts, but it's a fact that almond consumes a lot of water, and it's not the best nut for the environment. And the pecans grow everywhere. They're in people's backyards. They're in 20 states. And it's because it's a native nut. So why isn't the pecan dominating the snack nut aisle?
It sounds like opportunity, right? It sounds like opportunity, dear.
That is our opportunity. We've got a sales pipeline that's 2 years. We're backlogged.
Yeah.
We're in the process of getting new equipment, expanding. Well, I say expanding our facility. We were in the shelling business, and we've decided to get out of the shelling business because that's very seasonal, and we weren't running the shelling operation year round. So we've sold the shelling equipment, and we're now contracting with a pecan co-op for our product, for the raw product, just for the pecans themselves. They're all sourced from Georgia farmers with whom we have a relationship. And so we're making the finished goods. And so we're taking that shelling part of our facility. We just put new roof on. We're putting new flooring. We're making it food grade certified. We're bringing in equipment. We're bringing in new roasters, batch roasters, fire mixers, convection ovens.
So you're making a real commitment to this opportunity. And just a sidebar question is, what about the nostalgic road trip? Is that part of the brand, or is that not as important now, or is that something you maybe keep in the hip pocket?
It's always part of our brand. It's in our DNA. And we can still talk about the road trip. We still have some legacy stores, but the more important thing is that is our history, and that's always going to be a part of what our brand is about. And your brand story is just as much a part of what you sell as the actual product that you're selling. So maybe we're selling pecans, but our story is the story of the road trip. And the story of the road trip is not just getting in a car and going somewhere. Road trips represent something broader than the physical act of driving. Road trips represent freedom and independence that I think are uniquely American attributes. It's exploring. It's taking the route usually not taken. It's about the journey, not just the destination. It's about being with people you enjoy being with. It's about making choices about where you pull over and what you listen to and who you have in the car with you. And it's also about what snacks you take in the car with you.
Right. And I can see you're holding up pecans right now.
And independence and exploration. That's Stuckey's.
Yeah. That's great.
So that's our brand story. So we're not just selling pecans. We're selling this whole rich, amazing history that you get in every bite.
Oh, that's awesome. Ultimately, then, what does success look like? How do you know when you have hit that mythical target that you want to hit?
I have my own goal, and I've communicated this a lot. The broader statement of it is I want Stuckey's to be the go-to pecan snack in the country and really in the world. So I want, when people think of pecans, they think Stuckey's. And I do have a sales goal in mind as well. I'd like to hit 100 million. Now, that doesn't mean we have to stop there.
So let's think just a little bit is that journey of managing this ultimately. I mean, is there a point, let's say you get to 100 million, what does the team look like? You know, is it, and how do you know when it's outgrown your own capabilities, right? How do you, can you take it there yourself and with the partners you have, or do you need to add people along the way?
We'll need to add. But I have a great team in place, like the core people. I think we have those, but let's be real. Like, we're not going to hit 100 million overnight. And some of our team members are getting older and have already said they're going to retire in 3 to 5 years. So, you know, that team may shift. And I may retire. My business partner is 17 years younger than I am. So I anticipate he'll be with the company longer than I will be.
So in a way, you've got you've already kind of got that succession plan, maybe not literally in place, but you've got the ingredients, and it's not something you need to worry about first and foremost.
Yeah, I try not to worry about things. I prefer just to start planning and thinking about the eventuality. And I absolutely think about succession. I think if you don't, it's at your own risk. So I have other family members. I have 2 kids who have zero interest right now, and they've expressed that repeatedly in running Stuckey's. They're 17 and 21, so they're still young. But I have some nephews and nieces that I think are super smart and talented, and they're great-grandchildren of the founder of Stuckey's. So the sort of lineage is there. If they're interested, they all have the capacity, as far as I'm concerned. It's just whether they have the passion. So there's some prospects within the family line, and then we might bring on another partner.
Yeah. So, you know, we often talk about how entrepreneurs, everybody faces moments of doubt, right? In the journey. And sometimes it takes stubbornness to get through. And sometimes you've got to adapt and pivot, like you've mentioned. So, you know, when is stubbornness a virtue and when is it a vice in your view? When do you stick to your guns, or, you know, when do you pivot?
Yeah, I don't like stubbornness. I'm not a fan of stubbornness. I think that that connotes that you are not open to hearing feedback, that you're closed to hearing the feedback. I prefer to think of persistence. To me, that's a more positive attribute, where you have taken in the feedback, you've processed it, you're working with a team, and jointly you are doggedly pursuing an agreed upon goal, right? And you're persistent in that, but you're also open to making some adjustments as needed because circumstances change. And so our goal may remain, we want to sell more pecans to more people for more money, you know, to be the go-to pecan snack and candy brand in America. But we may have to rethink sometimes how we do that. You know, how much are we using distributors? How much are we using brokers? At what point can we not use brokers because we have infrastructure in place where we don't have to rely on that? You know, all of that is, you may be stuck to one strategy and then have to pivot.
Is there any, you know, closing advice you would give to people who are trying to either revive a brand or build a business and just getting started with that daunting large capital, you know, commitment and uncertain plan to get going?
Sure. I think the most important thing is to have a passion for what you're doing, because that's going to get you through those really hard times. And then surround yourself with people who feed that passion, who lift you up, who elevate your energy level. Like, I feel like my job every day, my main job when I wake up, is to keep my cup full and then to support the team around me and surround myself with people who we're all lifting each other up. It's a mutually supportive, collaborative process to build a company and to build a team. And if you don't have that, I don't see how anyone makes it. It's a Good to Great, which our team is reading right now, Jim Collins, and we're starting off with the management team reading it, but I want every single person who works at Stuckey's, from the frontline workers all the way up to the upper echelon, to read that book, because those leadership skills apply to all levels, and everyone should buy into that concept of, you get the right people on the bus and you go in the right direction, right? And you get the wrong people off the bus.
Yeah. No, it's a great point.
That's the point. You surround yourself with people who lift you up, who lift your energy. And the people who don't do that,
we have to get
them off the bus.
Right.
They're not on your bus. Let them be on someone else's bus. They do not need to be on the journey with you. That's those aren't your peeps.
It's a great point. So, and I know you had 9 employees when you started. How many employees do you have now?
100. Yeah.
Wow. All right.
Yeah.
So in 3 years, that is exponential.
I mean, they're the right 100. Like, we are doing a lot to build up and lift up that 100. Mm-hmm. We do food truck Fridays. We do team building. And I would love to say I know every single one of their names, but I'm getting there. And I do this great trick because everyone knows I like to post on social media. So I'll go through the factory and say, let me get a picture of you. Let's do a selfie together. And then I'll go back to our HR manager and say, who is this?
Very clever. Right.
Yeah.
And
then I'll write on the photo, right? I'll write their name. So then I can look through the photos.
Right. Now you've got it forever. You've got a photographic memory as far as anybody else is concerned, right?
Yeah. So ask me by the end of the year, if not sooner. I want to know all 100 employees by name.
That's great. All right. Well, a worthy goal, and I know you'll hit it. Well, in closing, how can people learn more about either the pecan log rolls or participating in the journey? What's the best way for people to stay abreast of what you're doing?
Really follow on LinkedIn. I mean, that's where I post the story. Follow me, Stephanie Stuckey, but also follow Stuckey's. And we're on all the social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram. Twitter is a little snarky and sarcastic, but I'm on Twitter. Stuckey's is on Twitter. I occasionally will get a video out there on TikTok. And then we have a wonderful website that is we're evolving. It's a work in progress, but Stuckeys.com.
Mm-hmm. Well, great.
And we have a blog. We have the Pecan blog roll.
Well, Stephanie, it's Stuckey's is such a great brand for our country. And it's so exciting to hear you articulating how you're reinvigorating it for the modern world in a very clever, creative, bootstrapping way. So, well, thanks for joining me today. You've got great lessons that inspire us and help us see around corners and be success on our own right. Thank you for that gift. We'll keep. I'm gonna keep eating my pecan log rolls. Enjoy that and keep following what you're doing.
Thank you, Ken. I appreciate your time and the opportunity to share our story.
Absolutely. Thanks, and we'll be in touch. All right, welcome back. Cannon Carr here with Claudia Bettinger. Claudia, I'm old enough to remember the Stuckey's road trip back when I was a kid with my sisters. My parents would take us to Stuckey's and we would go in and buy all kinds of knickknacks. But I think the brand's new to you, right? You didn't have that road trip and Stuckey's wasn't around. Just broadly, what spoke to you when you listened to this program?
I mean, you're totally right. I had no idea that Stuckey's was actually the first roadside store. I go to Buc-ee's all the time, but Stuckey's I didn't realize. But it was really, really cool to hear how the creative ways in which she's revitalizing this 87-year-old startup, as she says.
Exactly. It's just such a cool story. I thought we'd touch on our usual 3 or 4 summaries after we have these conversations. We like to do a quick wrap. And what's interesting, first, I'll just say before getting into those 3, this interview had all the classic things we do talk about in our podcast. Mm-hmm. In other words, Stephanie wasn't looking to be an entrepreneur, and we often encounter that in these podcasts, but circumstances kind of drove her into it. She spends a lot of time reinvesting upfront and not rewarding herself as much. And that's a key thing we see her early stage turnarounds and ventures experience. But she does at least have a cushion there, and that's important. And she talked about how the definition of success is changing, and she talks about how advisors matter. So we hear all those things, but there were 3 or 4 unique things here that I thought we would share. And the first one, I just loved how she talked about how negative feedback did not get her down. It didn't derail her or take away her energy. Her mindset was so open, and she turned that negative feedback into a positive.
Yeah. And it seemed like that negative feedback really helped her understand the need to pivot and expand the business from just the brick and mortar stores. And now they have so many avenues of revenue and ways that they're getting their products out there. So it was really cool to hear.
Yeah, totally. And not only that negative feedback part and that openness, that open mindset, we often talk to people, is stubbornness a virtue or a vice? And more importantly, when do you want to be uncompromising on something? And when do you need to be flexible? And in this, you could see Stephanie, she was uncompromising in our interpretation on the brand identity and what the brand meant. And she stayed true to that as a North Star. But at the same time, she's very flexible on how to monetize the brand.
Right.
And she's shown that she is willing to pivot and change, as you just highlighted. So just a fascinating insight there on negative feedback and flexibility. Secondly, we often talk about an ecosystem of advisors and how important that is to success. But sometimes it goes deeper than that. And we've heard several occasions, and Stephanie had her own way of talking about it, how, when you use your authentic self and tap into, the right way your customers are loyal to you and the brand, or the right way your employees are loyal to you, those helping hands will lift you up and open up doors that you never thought existed. And she spent time deliberately building that emotional connection to the brand, finding the right customers that, even though others had trashed the brand, they were still loyal, and she knew the power of that. And that lifts her up. And finding the right employees lifted her up.
Right. And she emphasized how good CEOs know how to build a team around them, because it takes a team to come up with the best solutions. And I think that shows what a good leader she is, to know that you need the advice of others around you to help navigate you to the best solutions.
Exactly. And those hands lifting you up and those emotional connections, they support you as a leader when you're authentic to the whole system, your values and the values that they have, your customers and your employees. But it helps you survive the tough times.
Yeah.
And it's such a key, in her own way, just another beautiful way of articulating that deep concept.
Absolutely. Well, and then the third point, it ties into one of my favorite stories that she told about the mystery boxes, and how she had all these knickknacks lying around that she saw were going for great prices on eBay, but she just didn't have time to sell, and turning that dead inventory into mystery boxes and advertising those more valuable pieces. It's such a creative solution, and I think really represents how she is as a leader.
Totally. And I think the concept there is, she talked about it, scarcity breeds innovation. Mm-hmm. And she said, look, it'll be a money-losing venture if we try to monetize all this dead inventory. But coming up with that creative package led to innovation and led to a better solution that actually was profitable. And time again in these podcasts, this is just a good example of it. We hear that crisis creates focus, which leads to success, even though you may not even see the path at the time. And this is just another example of how scarcity breeds innovation, crisis breeds focus, leads to success. Thought it was very cool. Just a final point here. We noted how Stephanie just deliberately and patiently is addressing the succession concept. Sometimes entrepreneurs feel it's too early to talk about succession. She's now 3 years into it, but a year into her turnaround here, you could already see succession bubbling up in a partner that was 17 years younger, a partner who's very capable. And, she's able to watch her team evolve and find out who are those future leaders. And she also talked a little bit about family members, maybe get involved, maybe not. She's under no pressure. But the beauty of it is she's deliberately thinking ahead on a good pace about ultimately continuing the business beyond her. So I thought it was well done there. So, well, Claudia, thanks as always for your thoughts. And we hope you all enjoyed the podcast episode with Stephanie, and we will see you on the next one.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Do you want to learn more about exit strategies for business owners? Visit cornercappodcast.com for a free copy of our ebook with everything you need to know to make a smooth transition out of your business. Tune back in next week for another episode.